Ragni's face slammed into the horse trough hard enough to crack a tooth. The soldiers' sons held him there while the villagers watched. Cold water flooded his nose and mouth. He clawed weakly at the boys, gripping his arms, but they only laughed harder. "Look at him kick," one sneered. Another shoved his head deeper beneath the surface. Ragni couldn't breathe. Panic exploded through his chest. Mud churned beneath his knees while boots gathered around the square to watch the spectacle. Someone chuckled, someone else muttered that the orphan probably deserved it. No one stepped forward, not the blacksmith standing 10 feet away, not the merchants pretending not to see, not even the guards, especially not the guards. The captain leaned against a post with his arms crossed, watching his own son drown a starving teenager for entertainment. Only when Ragni stopped struggling did they finally pull him back out. He collapsed onto the cobblestones, coughing blood and water, while laughter echoed through the square. "You survive because stronger men allow it." The captain stood over the soaked boy, sneering down at him. Ragni looked through wet strands of dark hair and said nothing. 15 years old, scrawny, half-starved, sleeping in barns and alleyways since the winter fever took his parents. A boy so powerless that even his suffering had become ordinary. The villagers were already dispersing. The show was over. Ragni wiped blood from his mouth and slowly rose to his feet. Soaking wet and shivering, he continued on his way. Rain hammered the rooftops while Ragni hid beneath the ruins of an abandoned watchtower beyond the village edge. Searching for dry wood and scraps to burn, his foot broke through the rotten flooring. Everything collapsed beneath him. He fell into darkness. Dust filled his lungs as he thudded hard onto shattered stone and bones. Beneath the tower lay an ancient chamber buried by time. In one dark corner, a faint purple glow pulsed in long, slow beats, like the peaceful breath of someone soundly sleeping. It was not a person, but a book bound in cracked black leather. Its metal clasps felt warm to Ragni's touch. He hesitated before opening it. The pages were covered in symbols drawn with faded violet ink, diagrams of human skeletons, ritual circles, words written in a flamboyant scrawl. They seemed to crawl inside his skull as he read them. His first instinct was fear. His second was hunger. By dawn, he had read half the tome, necromancy. The book was entirely about necromancy and the art of binding the dead to the living. By the following night, Ragni had made his decision. North of Darkbarrow stood the Kingsgrave tombs, a burial site older than the village itself. Ancient warriors slept there beneath enormous stone crypts, sealed by slabs too heavy for living men to lift alone. Ragni arrived carrying candles stolen from the chapel and a rusted knife tucked beneath his belt. Inside the tomb, the air smelled ancient. Dust coated the rows of sarcophagi lining the chamber walls. Kings and forgotten soldiers rested beneath carved lids. Ragni opened the tome with trembling hands. The ritual demanded blood. He sliced his palm. Dark drops splashed across the symbols he had painted onto the floor. At first, nothing happened. Then the candles bent outward as though pushed by invisible wind. The chamber groaned. Purple light bled from the cracks between the stones. Ragni's breath caught in his throat. His eyes ignited with violet fire. The tome's pages whipped violently. His dark hair rose around his face, twisting in an inexplicable updraft, while shadows crawled across the ceiling like living things. Then came the sound, scratching. A dozen stone coffins rattled at once. Ragni stared in disbelief. Bony fingers clawed beneath the sarcophagus lids, dry, fleshless hands scraping stone. Hollow moans echoed through the crypt. The dead had risen, but they could not escape. The lids were too heavy. Ragni stood frozen. Then he laughed. This was not ideal. He could hardly hope to free them alone. The ancient tombs had been built to imprison kings forever. Each sarcophagus was sealed beneath slabs of stone so massive that even living men would struggle to lift them. Ragni pressed both hands against one lid and shoved with all his strength. Nothing. The scratching continued beneath the stone. For a moment, despair crept into him. After everything, the blood, the ritual, the terror, he had created an army too weak to escape its own graves. Then he remembered something. 3 days earlier, the village had executed 2 highwaymen near the southern gate. Ragni remembered the bodies swinging from the gallows, enormous men with shoulders like oxen and arms thick as tree limbs. The villagers buried criminals outside consecrated ground, shallow graves, easy to reach. By midnight, Ragni stood in the rain beside the execution field with a stolen shovel in his hands. Thunder rumbled overhead as he dug through wet earth. The first corpse appeared pale in the moonlight, rope still hanging around its swollen neck. The second lay beside him beneath barely 2 feet of mud. Even dead, the men looked powerful. Ragni opened the tome. The pages fluttered wildly despite the still air. Purple light spread across the graves. The dead men jerked violently. Mud shifted, then both corpses inhaled at once. Ragni staggered backward as the bodies slowly sat upright. Their cloudy eyes burned with dim, violet light. Unlike the ancient dead, these corpses were fresh, strong, and obedient. "Follow," Ragni whispered. The 2 undead giants obeyed immediately. Together they marched through the forest toward Kingsgrave, while rain poured from the black sky. Inside the crypt, the scratching intensified the moment Ragni entered. The trapped undead sensed him, or sensed freedom. Ragni pointed toward the nearest sarcophagus. "Lift it!" The 2 corpses stepped forward, muscles bloated by death strained beneath pale skin as they dug their fingers beneath the edge of the massive stone lid. For a second, nothing happened. Then the slab moved. Stone groaned against stone. Dust rained from the ceiling. With a roar of effort from dead lungs, the 2 undead criminals heaved the sarcophagus lid sideways until it crashed onto the floor with enough force to shake the chamber. Silence followed. Then a skeletal hand slowly gripped the edge of the coffin. An ancient warrior pulled itself free. Its armor hung rusted across yellowed bones. Purple fire burned inside its empty eye sockets. The undead knight stared directly at Ragni. Then it knelt. A smile slowly spread across Ragni's face. "Open the others," he commanded. All through the night, the dead labored beneath Kingsgrave. Heavy stone lids crashed one after another onto the crypt floor, while ancient warriors dragged themselves from centuries of imprisonment. Every single one bowed before Ragni, and the tome taught him how to strengthen them. Fresh corpses carried stronger life remnants. Animal bones could reinforce broken skeletons. Iron fused to undead flesh created tireless soldiers immune to pain. So Ragni scavenged. Dead wolves from the forest, bodies from forgotten graves, execution victims stolen from burial pits outside the village walls. His army grew in the darkness beneath Kingsgrave, and with every passing night, Ragni changed. The frightened orphan vanished piece by piece. Something colder replaced him. By the time the village council noticed, it was already too late. Ragni watched the soldiers marching toward Kingsgrave from atop a distant hill. He almost pitied them. Almost. The soldiers found the tomb entrance before sunset. Their screams reached the village after dark. 3 men staggered back alive, babbling about glowing eyes beneath the earth. The captain called them cowards. The next morning, he led 20 men to finish the matter himself. None returned. That night, Darkburrow locked its gates. Orders were given to keep the torches lit through the night. Frightened villagers kept watch, while whispering prayers inside their homes. Rain fell steadily. Then came the thunder, not from the sky, from the ground. It trembled. Rotting hands burst upward through the washed-out streets. Skeletons clawed from beneath houses. Ancient warriors emerged from the dark shadows beneath the walls, carrying rusted blades and cracked shields, and at their center walked Ragni. His eyes glowed violet beneath the rain. The villagers stared in horror as the starving orphan they once ignored approached the gates surrounded by death itself. Then the dead attacked, and chaos swallowed Darkburrow. The church bells rang until the tower collapsed into purple flames. Ragni walked calmly through the destruction. The blacksmith who ignored him died, clutching a hammer. The guards who laughed at him were ripped apart beside the walls they once protected. And the boys who bullied him, bodies convulsed violently after death, bones cracked, eyes reopened, glowing violet. One by one they rose again as his eternal servants. Ragni stood alone in the center of the village square, while his army waited motionless around him. Now Darkburrow belonged to the dead, and they loved him like no living soul ever had. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like another original story inspired by a random prompt, make sure to return again soon.